Yo, yo, yo. Hey, guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast. Our goal around here is to bring the best thinkers, leaders, speakers in dentistry to bring great information to help you create a better practice, a better life. We're going to do exactly that with a dear friend of ours who's been on the podcast many times before. His name is Tom Viola, and he's brilliant on the subject of pharmacology. And today we talk about a hot subject in dentistry, one of the hotter subjects in dentistry. It's synthetic opioids, what you need to know and what you should be considering about the future and how it relates to your patients and your practice. It's an awesome episode. So please listen up. I hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast. You know the jam. I say that every time, but you know the jam. The jam is this. If you're listening to this station, our jam is to bring the best minds, the best speakers, the best influencers, the best teachers anywhere to bring great information to help you improve your practice and your life. And we're going to do just that today with one of our regular friends, Thomas Viola. He is the man. Pharmacology. It's going great, man. I miss you. It's been a while since we've had you on. You're a busy guy, and I'm just going to say this. Like, you're one of my favorite of all time, and we met during the COVID conference, and if you've never seen him speak, you are missing out, and you've been living under a rock, because you make one of the most difficult subjects that's so important and constantly moving. It's probably one of the most dynamic topics in dentistry. It's changing all the time. Patients are changing. Information's changing. It's pharmacology. And so I'm so glad to have you back. And today we're going to be talking about synthetic opioids in the world and in dentistry and in your practice and why that's so important. Thanks for being back, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kirk. You know, this is one of my favorite podcasts to do. I love Best Practices Show. I listen to it all the time. I learn a lot from all the other great speakers you have, and I learn a lot from you. And you and I, like I said, have been good friends since COVID. I'm going to say it out loud. You're probably the best thing that happened to me after COVID, buddy. Just making your acquaintance and being friends. I don't think we even interacted before that. I don't think you and I even really ever spoke in the same place before that. So here we are.
Yeah,
after COVID. All good.
I think you're right because, and that's the benefit of something that had so much adversity to it. We had the opportunity in that time to do education and meet people we had never met. And so I'm sure that we were at the same places but we're just coming and going. And it's great to just, to finally get to know you and watch what you're doing. So I want you to do this though. We have a lot of people that are listening and a lot of new listeners and different. I want people to know who you are. So give us a little bio. What do you do?
Well, all right. So again, and to your point, my friend, we were doing 2 shifts in the night. You and I'm sure we were in the same place multiple times. But that's what I've been doing all these years. Some 30 years ago, I got licensed as a pharmacist. Went back, got my advanced credentials to speak on pharmacology. And chose dentistry as my specialty because I really thought that dentistry was fascinating. To me, dentistry was like a big mystery. It was this big enigma. I really didn't know what people did in dentistry, who was who. And, as I've often said to my audience, no one knows what's going on inside this thing. Right. It's the one part of your body. Well, I'm sure there are other parts, but there's one part of your body that people are working in that you don't see and you can't tell what's going on. So a lot of it was a mystery, the nomenclature, the tooth numbering, just all of it was just, baffling to me. So I really started getting involved in dentistry. And the thing that got me was how people were welcoming me into the profession because I didn't know anything about dentistry. When I first got started, I didn't know squat. I didn't know a bicuspid from a tooth or a valve in the heart. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. And so I had a lot of really good people who today are still really good friends of mine, really good people in dentistry who basically said, look, Viola, you're basically a babe in the woods. You're asking me to take you under my wing and teach you everything I know about dentistry. Guess what? I don't have time. I'm really busy, but I'm willing to do it. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to listen to every word I say. You're going to try to be the sponge as much as you can. And I'm only going to really tell you the things you absolutely need to know, because anything else is just fluff and you don't need to know it, and it's wasting both of our time. So here's what you need to know. Listen up and ask questions, because that's the way you're going to learn it.
Yeah.
And so, Kirk, honestly, that's how I learned to be a speaker, because I realized I learned a lot about dentistry in a short period of time from really smart people who just gave me what I need to know and nothing more. And so I made it my mission after that to really convert to full-time speaking, to pay back the favor, to go back and visit with all these dental folks, some who have never heard of me before, but I still pay the debt forward. Here's what pharmacology is. Here's what you need to know. Here's exactly what you need to know and nothing more, because the rest is just fluffy. You don't need to know it, and I don't want you to waste your time. Here's the basic principles. Here are the practical points, the pearls you need to take with you back to practice so you can use pharmacology effectively and efficiently as a tool, like every other tool, you have on the tray.
Yeah. And so I want you to speak on that for a second. So if I'm a young dentist listening, give me some perspective on how important pharmacology is to my practice if I'm looking at 3 decades of practice in front of me.
It's never been more essential to patient care. That's the motto on my website, and it's so true, because your patients have never been so medically complex. They are taking more medications these days. They are treating more disease states these days. We are identifying more disease states these days. We are diagnosing disease states earlier in life. So you've got people living longer who are treating diseases longer with more and more medications. And so as a dental professional these days, you've got to walk down 2 sides of a very narrow street. You have to be able to be knowledgeable in every drug we use in dentistry: analgesics, anesthetics, anti-infectives, because any one of those can affect the patient's medical care and the drugs they use to treat their medical conditions. But at the same time, you got to be an expert and walk down this side of the street, because here you know everything about every medication and every disease state a patient is treating with those medications, because any one of those can affect dentistry. So you've got to be an expert in the medical side of dentistry and the dental side of medicine. Yeah. And that is a tall order. I mean, I do this for a living, so it's easy for me, but imagine being a dental professional, having to know everything plus everything I know. That's, overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. And is it safe to say, I mean, it's always good to add great perspective to this. Pharmacology, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars behind the R&D. So it's a moving target. So you may have taken a course a long time ago on something, but hold tight. Things will change in a matter of time, right?
Couldn't have said it better. Pharmacology is one of those courses I think people look at and say, it's just another one of those courses I got to get through. Like, C's get degrees. Let me get through this course and I can move on. And then they don't realize later, wow, I wish I remember that stuff from pharmacology, because it's really important now. And I didn't really take it for what it was worth back then. I should have paid more attention. So Here I am to give it back.
That's so great. I just appreciate you, buddy. And today we're going to be talking about synthetic opioids in dentistry. Now, if you're listening to the podcast, I'll give you a secret. I get all these cool people on, like Viola, and I always want to know, like, what's the thread? What keeps coming up? And so you mentioned a couple things, and you mentioned this one keeps coming up. Let's talk about the why this is an important topic in conversation now.
Yep, I think the unfortunate and untimely death of Matthew Perry really brought this back into the spotlight again, where I can't say it any other way than you don't know the demons that lurk behind the facade. Lots of folks have internal demons. I do, and I'm not ashamed to say them. They're out there and they've plagued me for years. But everyone has demons, no matter what they are. And sometimes the demon is substance use disorder. Not me personally, but I've had family members who've dealt with it. And so you never know what demons a person is dealing with or trying to conquer. And as dental professionals, we talk all about medical histories. I'm sure you've heard me say it 1,000 times. Take the medical history. But it's not just that. It's also looking behind the medical history, looking behind the facade that people put up and seeing, okay, what else is there brewing here? What else should I be aware of, and should I be accommodating for this patient? Because heck, if that person is dealing with anxiety, for example, find me a more stressful place in this world than a dental chair when you're a layperson and don't know what's going on in that dental office. The joke I tell everybody is, you walk into a medical office and you walk in the back, and what do you see? Doors, right? Little rooms with little doors, and everybody's safe behind their little door. You don't ever see anybody, but they're there. You can hear them, right? And then you walk into a dental office, and it's like walking into a little shop of horrors. You see open operatories, other humans on their backs just laying there. You hear high-speed instrumentation like drills and cavitrons, and you smell things like burning flesh, and you're like, what kind of place is this? And then you get in the operatory in your own chair, and everybody comes at you from behind. So you're always like, what's going to happen next? It's nerve-wracking and tension-producing and anxiety-ridden. And so we're going to take a person who may have issues with depression or anxiety, who may be using substances that may alter their response to a real-life situation, and putting them into one of the most stressful situations a patient can find themselves. And that's why we have to be able to have that sixth sense to read beyond the medical history, to find out what's lurking back there that we may have to deal with.
Yeah. So I want to go back to what you said. Now, I mentioned this to you. I didn't really follow exactly what happened with Matthew Perry. I did know, when it happened, and I did hear recently about the arrest. But my first thought was what you were thinking about that. So can you give us your perspective on what happened, just so we can kind of get everybody on the same page? And what were some of your thoughts on that whole process?
Yeah, sure. Kurt, I'll say, I serve as an expert witness. I do a lot of litigation, civil and criminal litigation. So I'm very careful to couch every one of my answers and say it appropriately. Everything I'm going to say about the people involved is alleged. None of it's been proven. So everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But the alleged behavior is that Matthew Perry was supplied ketamine from some people who may not be above board 100%. Again, alleged, right? 2 physicians were involved, again, allegedly. And he was administered ketamine by, again, allegedly by his personal assistant, who may or may not have had any medical training whatsoever. And he was receiving, again, allegedly, very large doses of ketamine. Now, when you hear ketamine, especially some of us, more seasoned clinicians in dentistry will remember ketamine as something we actually used in dentistry for a while as a dissociative hallucinogen to basically dissociate the patient from the procedure that we were doing. And in some states, it's still common practice to use ketamine. Ketamine is often used as a veterinary anesthetic, so you get both ends of the spectrum, but ketamine is often used now to treat depression in a clinical setting, when other forms of depression treatments aren't working. But ketamine is used for a wide variety of different illnesses and different psychoses. So all we know for sure is that Matthew Perry had issues with substance use disorder in the past, and ketamine may have been a substitute for some of the other substances he was no longer using. Again, I don't know the man. I don't know him personally. I can't speak to any of those points other than to say, if that was the case, he led an exemplary life trying to tell people to not use substances, to push people to have the courage to walk away from substances, and yet he himself was still a victim of substance use disorder. And so imagine if he's out there, what other examples we might have of people who are fighting that brave fight every day. As I've said to a lot of my audiences, and my cousin who passed away from opioid use disorder said this to me prior to his death. He said, Tom, this disease is the one disease that people blame you for. If you have cardiovascular disease, nobody blames you and says, would you have one too many cheeseburgers in your life? Or if you have diabetes, nobody says, would you have one too many donuts in your life? But when you have substance use disorder, it's, why don't you get over it already? What's taking you so long? Snap out of it. Get sober already. It's a disease. Right. And sometimes, even though, despite our best efforts, we're not successful in treating it. Right. And so I wanted everyone listening to realize that could be the case. And maybe there are signs that are somewhat obvious, And maybe there are signs that are not so obvious. And maybe the drug itself is obvious. Maybe the drug itself is not so obvious. And we've never seen such a proliferation of synthetic opioids as we've seen today.
Right.
It started with heroin, and I'm sure everyone is well aware of heroin's, addiction potential, because like any opioid, obviously it's very addicting. It's very likely to cause you to become dependent quickly. And of course, resistance develops, right? Tolerance develops to its effects. You have to take more and more. But what you've seen is an evolution, right? It started with heroin. But heroin is sold in bricks, which weigh pounds and kilograms and are difficult to conceal and are difficult to transport without much detection, right? Without detection. So what's next? Fentanyl and carfentanil. Why? Because in a little plastic bag, 2 inches around, lengthwise and widthwise, I can carry enough fentanyl to kill a whole town of people, right? So fentanyl is easy to carry. It's incredibly potent, and it's incredibly easy to conceal. Okay, carfentanil, a veterinary offshoot of fentanyl, even more potent, used in large animals and even more deadly. Then came the entrance of xylazine, a veterinary anesthetic that is basically used to imprison people in cyclic fentanyl use. So the way this works is I give you the fentanyl and I've laced it with xylazine. Xylazine as a tranquilizer in humans has a duration of action of somewhere between 8 to 10 hours. Well, if I give you fentanyl with xylazine, the fentanyl is going to wear off in about 6 hours. But the xylazine is going to keep you in basically a chemical-induced trance. And if you've seen video online, you know what I'm talking about, of chemical-induced trance for 10 hours. By the time you come out of under the influence of xylazine, you're 4 hours into withdrawal. You're desperate for another dose of fentanyl, which I'll be happy to sell you with more xylazine. And so I'll keep you in this prison of cyclical fentanyl use over and over again. And this is why people's lives are destroyed because of chemistry, because of pharmacology, if you will. So we have to be aware that there are those folks out there who might be using these substances, leading what appears to be normal lives. And yet, if we now start using the drugs that we're used to using in dentistry, like opioids to treat pain and some sedatives for conscious sedation and minimal oral sedation, we could be putting their lives at risk because we simply don't know that they're using these drugs recreationally.
Yeah. Tom, if I'm a young dentist, I'm kind of overwhelmed at this point. Now, it's a lot, and that's why I love having you on here. First of all, let's talk about what this means to me as a dentist, even a little bit more. Is this a big problem in dentistry? And then secondly, I'd love for you to just talk about, okay, let's start here. Do you have a starting point, even the basic track of how to think better about this?
Okay, so first thing, if I'm a young dentist, I have to realize there's always something new, right? And I don't think I really know everything, because as soon as I think I know everything about substance use disorder, there's yet another drug to be concerned with. So let me give you some examples of right now, today. So if I'm a young dentist, I'm in this profession, a couple of months now, just having been licensed. Okay, tianeptine. No one's ever heard of it. What's tianeptine? It was called gas station heroin for a long time. What the heck is it? Tianeptine is an antidepressant that's not available here in the U.S. It's only available in some countries in Europe. But in very high doses, it has an opioid-like effect. But because it was never a prescription drug in the U.S., it was sold in smoke shops, gas stations, you name it. So it's widely available. And you got to be concerned because kids are likely to experiment with some of these drugs since they're widely available and easily accessible. Then you've got the nitazines. Nitazines are synthetic opioids that were developed in Europe in the 50s and 60s and were shelved because people realized they were way too addictive to be used for legitimate purposes. But guess what? Somebody found them on the shelf, and now they're widely available. Lots of underground black market sales of nitazines that are, again, synthetic opioids. So just take those two examples. Then phenibut, which sounds a lot like phenylbutazone, but that's an ancient drug for for a veterinary use now. But phenibut is another drug, mostly available in Russia, but here in the States as well. Again, used in high doses, it has an opioid-like effect. And heck, while I'm at it, let's talk about an oldie but goodie, gabapentin, which a lot of people use for neuropathy and nerve pain, but in very high doses can also have an opioid-like effect. If you're asking, why do I need to know these, Tom? The answer is because they're going to go under the radar for most people. Because if you're thinking, well, yeah, but if people are using these drugs, they're going to probably show up on a urine test. No, they're not. As a matter of fact, gabapentin is never going to raise a red flag on a urine test, because if I'm taking gabapentin for chronic pain, oh yeah, it'll show up in my urine. But guess what? I'm taking it in higher doses than anybody knows to get that opioid-like effect. And therefore, I can fly under the radar for a long time. Now, why that matters is no one's going to mention this on a medical history. If they do, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
You're going to use sedative for conscious sedation. You're going to use things like propofol, and you're going to use benzodiazepines. You may prescribe an opioid, forgive me, to treat someone's pain. How do I get this information, Tom, if nobody wants to tell me?
Yeah.
And the answer is you've got to be creative in the way you ask questions. And this is not for the faint of heart, okay? Because Lord knows in the world of dentistry, you don't have time to use the restroom and eat lunch every day. Production is king, and you're rattling between appointments, trying to get from one patient to the next. You may not have time to have these in-depth conversations, but at some point, the hair on the back of your neck has to stand up a little bit, and you have to say, you know what, I have a feeling. And that's when you ask the question. So what's the question look like? This is my take. You can use any word you like, okay? My take is, look, I really don't want to know if you're using any substances. To be honest, it's none of my business. Therefore, I really shouldn't know. However, everything you do, every drug you take, every substance you use can impact anything I'm going to use to treat you today. And that may cause you harm. And I don't want to cause you harm. So I guess in a way I am asking about any other substances you use, because I need to know to keep you safe. So just tell me everything. It doesn't have to go anywhere. I'm not the police. I'm not the DEA. I'm not going to just, it's going to stay here. But between you and me, I need to know. And then, Kirk, stop talking.
Right.
The hardest thing to do, because it's going to bring up an awkward, uneasy silence, dead air, as I like to call it. It's okay. Give them the space to say what it is they have to say in a safe environment, knowing full well you've reassured them that it's not going anywhere. And that's when you're going to get it, if you're going to get it at all. Now, if they don't tell you, they don't tell you. But what's important here is that you made the effort. And please, from the litigious side of things, make sure you document that you had that conversation.
Yeah, that was my question. That's brilliant, Tom. So if you guys are listening, just go back and listen to that again. So 2 things on the documentation part. Do I document that I asked that question? And then how much do I document about what they say? Can you just walk us through that?
Absolutely. So it could be something as simple as patient denied use of other substances, or patient denied the use of other opioids or other substances of a potential substance use disorder. However you want to word it, it doesn't matter. The point is you do have to document it. You may not want to document a lot. I get it, because you've already promised the patient it wouldn't go anywhere. But remember, you don't operate on an island. Dentistry is a lot like operating on an island, and I get it. You work in your own practice, you do your own thing, and sometimes, being able to conference with other people in the profession is limited. That's why you go to meetings. But the point is, you don't work on an island in your office, meaning you're not the only practitioner. If you're a solo practitioner, great. But, there are other people who are in that office, your hygienist, your assistant, who need to know this information too. And if you work with another colleague, they're going to need to know it too. So make sure you document enough to get the point across without straying from whatever you promised this person. Again, your files are yours, but I want to make sure that you honor that promise, that it's going to stay between the two of you. But you have to document, because if you don't document, it never happened.
Right.
And trust me, I've been through enough of these proceedings. 3 years from now, some smart aleck attorney is going to ask you, oh, so tell me about that day. What do you remember about that patient on that day, and their clinical, the suitability, their clinical suitability for a procedure that day? What did you feel as far as their suitability for treatment? And you're going to have to try to convince everyone in that courtroom that you remember that patient from that day 3 years ago after you've seen 1,000 patients since. It's just not going to happen. But if you document it, it's indisputable.
Yeah. So brilliant. So well said, Tom. And our goal is not to create fear here, but that, it does happen. People do get fearful. I always think of two things when I think of you, Tom. And number one, you're giving us the thinking behind it. And then number two is a lot of times you don't have to make these efforts. These are just systems. I love how you ask the 3 questions. I actually steal so many things that you teach is the 3 questions. What are you taking? Do you know why you're taking it? And then did you take it today? Did I say that right? Did I get those 3? Look at that. See, I'm a good student. Can you walk through those 3 questions? And I like the 4th one that you added here. So if you're listening to this, if you use that, I actually don't think people are very honest at all in health history settings. I mean, they tell you, if you've ever been to the doctor, you personally, myself personally, they go, do you drink? I go, yeah, occasionally. Like how much? Well, I had a beer yesterday. Well, I don't want to tell them I had 3 yesterday because, you're going to leave out some information, and I would imagine it's bigger when you're addicted to substances. But walk us through the system of those 3 questions. I always love to give value that, that you do. So could you do that?
Absolutely. So remember, everyone on the team takes a medical history. Everyone. Everybody who walks in on an laboratory asks 1 or 2 questions about the patient's medical history. Doesn't matter. Spread the wealth, right? And share the load, because you want to make sure that, if you're not asking that question, someone else is, because if you had to take the time to sit there and ask every question, it's going to take you too long and it's going to disincent you to do it, and then you're not going to want to do it again. So ask the questions, right, amongst the team. Everybody who walks in asks 1 or 2 questions. The 3 big questions, though, have to be, when you're going over the medications, what do you take, right? Don't say the words medication. Like, oh, I want to know what medications you take, because they're only going to talk to you about medications, little bottles they get from the pharmacist. And there's way more than that you need to know about. You need to know about over-the-counter drugs, dietary supplements, substances. You need to know everything. So what do you take is as open-ended as you can get. Just let them talk, okay? And you just keep writing or just keep typing. Why do you take it is important for 2 reasons. 1, because it establishes buy-in. Because I want to take this person's temperature. Are they really taking prescription drugs the way they should, the way their doctor told them to, or are they taking it, willy-nilly, whatever they feel like? Because that's going to tell me if they're going to do the same with the medications I'm going to prescribe them. But also, there are a lot of medications that are used for more than one thing, and you don't want to assume anything. So if I'm on a blood pressure medication like amlodipine, Norvasc, well, somebody could be using that for blood pressure, certainly hypertension, but they could be using it for angina. They could be using it for arrhythmia. I have no idea why they're using it. And that matters, right? Those are different medical treatments, but those are also different treatment plans as far as I'm concerned. And then why do you take it? It has to lead to, did you take it today? Because you're telling me you're taking amlodipine for hypertension. I just took your blood pressure. It's elevated. Did you take it today? Because if your blood pressure is elevated and you're taking amlodipine, guess what? Amlodipine's not working. In my opinion, everyone who sits in your chair who has hypertension, who's taking medication for hypertension, should have normal to slightly elevated blood pressure. If they don't, then they're not taking their medication or not taking it correctly, or they're taking the wrong medication. So those are the questions that inspire a lot of other questions. And again, it can get out of hand. It can get sort of go awry, and you could be spending a lot more time on medical histories than you want. But that's why you've got to use pharmacology to deduce the right questions to ask. So your dental assistant asks a bunch of questions. Your hygienist maybe takes a blood pressure. You walk in as the dentist. Now you've got a lot of information, a lot of facts. Okay, they said they're on amlodipine. Their blood pressure is relatively high. Let me ask them if they take it every day. But let me ask them why they're taking it. You can trim down a lot of the questions that you would normally ask if you can just get all the other data from your other team members helping you, so you can drill down to the questions that are most important. The worst question you could ask is simply, any changes to your medical history? Because the answer for sure is going to be no.
Right.
I've seen it a million times. No, and let's move on. And so you don't get the information at all.
Yeah. And think about my simple brain, that's a closed-ended question. You're asking open-ended questions, which forces people to think and respond. Now, one other thing I'll just say, and we'll say this to the end. If you're a young dentist listening and you're like, this is a lot, don't worry. Tom has an incredible, coaching process. He's got a great, educational system. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That'll get you caught up on what you need to know about a lot of these things. But gosh, I can't thank you enough for this because it's a game changer. Now, I want to go back to synthetic opioids too and finish those thoughts on that. So what have we not covered that the listeners need to know about synthetic opioids in dentistry?
There's always going to be a new drug. There's always going to be something new because the DEA is always looking to make substances illegal. So that is an engine to generate more and more substances. But by the time the substance that we're talking about is hitting the mainstream, by the time there's genuine public awareness of that substance, most people have already moved on to the next substance. So, for example, I know there's a few more synthetic opioids out there already that we don't even have names for yet here in the States, but I know they're already here. So that's one thing. But the other part of this is don't forget oldies but goodies, right? What's old is new again in substance use disorder. So, for example, kratom, which is a tropical tree, right? A tree that grows in rainforests, produces leaves that have substances in them that are both synthetic opioid as well as stimulant producing, have effects like that. So it's a synthetic opioid in a way because it's a naturally occurring opioid that I can alter to make it, much more potent. But sometimes I'll just use regular old kratom, right? And at the same time, it's a stimulant. Again, I can make that stronger, but I could just use regular old kratom and get a stimulant and an opioid together. Where would I get it? You can grow your own in your own home and use it yourself. But kratom is widely available. Now, if you're saying why, I thought kratom has been around for 20 years. Why all of a sudden the sudden resurgence? Because mainstream use of kratom has become a thing. Because kratom is an opioid substitute. And if I've, been addicted to opioids and if I've had substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, I may not have access to that opioid anymore, but I can access kratom anywhere. And a couple of news articles have come out about how widespread kratom use is, even amongst, people who are middle class, stay-at-home parents. Wow. Why is kratom so popular? Because it's a stimulant and an opioid, and I can use it for either or both. And it's something I can grow myself, and it's something that I can share with my neighbors and share with my friends. And just like that, Kirk, as soon as I said the word, I bet we moved on to something else.
Right.
So if you're a new dentist, don't be surprised by anything. Ask questions, and if you don't know, look it up. And if you ever have any issues where you don't know what a substance is, heck, you can always reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah. Gosh, I have so many questions just about this. And Tom, I was just thinking about this. I would love to do an episode with you on best practices for the script pad in our own office. Do you know what I mean? Yes. Only because we hear about stories, and when you hear about them, you're like, oh my gosh, how could that happen in the first place? Type of a thing. So I think I'm always a big fan of prevention. Just best practices. It's why we call it Best Practices Show. And so if you guys tune in a future episode, I won't tell you when it's coming, but I'm going to volunteer Viola to come back and give us a whole episode on how to do best practices of your own script pad in your own office, just like 101, those things. So, gosh, I love talking to you about so many things, and you are just a wealth of knowledge. I want you to share with our listeners where they can go, and I'm going to tell you guys, just go and follow Viola. Number one, it's awesome information. Number two, he actually makes this really fun, so it's not dry and boring, and he keeps it incredibly up to date. But before we do that, give us some final thoughts on synthetic opioids in dentistry.
Yeah. So final thoughts are, the title is Synthetic Opioids in Dentistry, but really what I'm saying without saying it is don't be surprised by anything you hear when you take a medical history. And if you're accessing information in a medical history that you say later on, wow, I never would have known that, then you're doing it right. That's the whole point of taking a medical history. It's not the verbatim, do the same thing every day, same thing over and over again and get the same results. This is being creative, thinking outside the box, getting your team involved and getting the information that you really need, not just the fluff, but the actual information you really need about that patient. Get them to confide, get them to, work with you as a partner so that, you're doing the best for them and for yourself. These are skills that take years to develop. So don't be too hard on yourselves if you're out there and saying, I can never ask those kinds of questions, Tom. Or I need you to sit there next to me and then tell me what questions to ask. No, you'll get there. You'll ask the questions yourself. You'll get good at this. It's like a muscle. You got to exercise it to make it develop. But start today. Start practicing that today. Have a huddle with your team and get them involved too and say, look, this is a real problem. We all know it is. And a lot of it's, maybe I don't want to know, but you do want to know because ultimately it's all about keeping patients safe and keeping your team members safe and keeping yourself safe. You worked hard to get that license. Don't be willing to overlook things and put your license in jeopardy. It's important that you take care of patients and do everything you can to keep them safe, but you got to keep yourself safe as well.
Yeah, buddy, I'm so grateful for you. You are just amazing. And so tell our listeners a couple things. Number one, if they can find out more about you, because I know a lot of people are going to want to find out more, where they can go. I want you to talk about your online system that you have. And then also, I'll just say this. If you have a study club and you haven't had Viola, you are missing out. Number one, again, I'll just say it again and again and again. It is wildly entertaining. It's engaging. It's a lot of fun. It's also incredibly informative. And it also mixes up your programming. So, you've done enough bonding. You've done enough crown and bridge. You've done enough ortho. You've done enough airway. This is a great component as a study club leader to change up your programming that people will leave and go, that was an incredible night or incredible day of education. So if you haven't had Viola, please have him out. But Tom, take us through this. Where do I go? And I'm going to post the links down into the show notes. So where do I go if I'm a listener?
I got to tell you, Kirk, I don't want to blow my own horn here, but it's so funny. I'll be invited to speak at a study club, and whenever anybody hears the term pharmacology, you can almost hear the collective groan, And so many people have come to me after my lectures and have said, I really thought that was going to be boring. I brought the newspaper, I brought my book, I brought my laptop, because I was just going to plan on sitting there and, idling away the hours. And I actually learned something from you. And I didn't think I had anything left to learn about pharmacology, but thank you, because you really opened my eyes to what I need to know. And all the stuff I didn't need to know really didn't matter in the first place. And that's what makes me want to do this every day, Kirk. People say, man, you're on the road, 45 weeks out of the year, aren't you? My house is a place where I keep my stuff because I want to be out there, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, giving back, paying that great favor forward. But it doesn't stop having me out to study clubs. By the way, if you have a study club, please have me out. I'd love to talk to study clubs. They're great groups of people. And I know people who come to a study club are really willing to learn. They want to learn. They're desperate for that information. They're desperate to learn. And I'm there to provide that education and information. Some of the bigger meetings as well, love to come out. And if I'm in your city, if I'm at, Yankee Dental, Chicago Midwinter, the Hinman, Greater New York at the end of the year, Star of the South, Star of the North, CDA, whatever your meeting you plan on going to this year, or if it's in your hometown, and you see me in the schedule, come out and say hi. I'd love to put a face to a name. I'd love to be able to meet you in person. But beyond that, I also use my website as a point of outreach. So it's tomviola.com. I'm a simple-minded man, so I named it after myself. So come out and take a look at my website anytime you want. It's got just everything pharmacology you could think of, podcasts, articles I've written, all the information, and even courses you can take online. I don't make a big deal out of promoting my own online courses because basically they're really there for people who actually need the credits and who want to learn a little more of the background behind some of the courses that I give live. So they are there in case you want to earn some credits. And of course, unlike a lot of people, I don't use social media for gaining followers. That was never the point. I use social media really as an outreach again, say, hey, did you know this about pharmacology? Or hey, did you know this about pharmacology? Because I want to not just attract people as followers, really I want to educate them. And so if it opens up an eye, if someone avoids websites, avoids live meetings, and just really focuses on social media platforms, well, here I am, pay my little page a visit. You can find me anywhere on social media at Pharmacology Declassified. So come on by and spend a few minutes, and hopefully you'll get some pearls of information you can take back with you to practice that day.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to tell you guys, just do it. You will be glad that you did. And if you're not taking notes during this podcast, don't worry, we're taking notes for you. You can flip up to the show notes, whether you listen to Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, doesn't matter. All the links that Tom mentioned, we're going to put them right in the body so you can click right on it and take you right there. Tom, I'm going to have you back again and again and again, whether you like it or not. So awesome.
Hey, I'll be back as often as you want, Kirk. You're my friend, and you're a great one at that, and you're a colleague, and I would look forward to just doing everything I can to support you because, hey, you were there for me during the pandemic, buddy. I'll never forget it. I looked at my speaking calendar, and it was erased in a matter of a week. I was unemployed, and there you were offering me some work to do and a chance to, say what I had to say, and I'll be forever grateful for that opportunity. So thank you, buddy.
Well, it goes both ways. I needed you as bad as, you probably needed our network of people to, but I was having a panic attack and I was unemployed too in a moment's notice. And so we needed to do something, and education was the only thing that could keep me away from CNN. So it was great to just talk to dental educators. And what was really interesting about the pandemic is people had time, Bill Robbins is like, I'm not doing anything, so let's talk, and so having you on and all these great people. And what we really found at the end of the day was dentistry is an incredibly noble profession. There wasn't one person, not one, that said no. Everybody's like, absolutely. What can I talk about? I'm like, whatever you want to talk about. So, and you showed up for us, brother. I'm so grateful. So awesome. Well, stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed today, which I hope you did, please share this with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions for things you guys want to see. We're going to keep lining them up. We're going to keep bringing it. We love this stuff. And so as you show up, we'll bring great information to help you create a better practice and a better life. So until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep watching or keep listening to the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy your day.